Patagonia is a wild land at the end of the earth, pounded by ferocious storms and surrounded by violent seas. Huge glaciers rip through a landscape carved by ice. Survival here means being tough enough to cope with brutal winters and canny enough to exploit short seasons of opportunity. On land, wildlife struggles in one of the world's most extreme environments, but oceans explode with life. This is South America's most rugged wilderness. Patagonia is the southernmost part of South America. Stretching south from the Rio Colorado, it covers over 300,000 square miles of Argentina and Chile. It's a place of extremes, home to one of the world's largest deserts. And yet billions of liters of fresh water are locked into the ice of its vast glacier fields. It's a land of the unexpected, where unusual animals live in unusual places. Penguins nest under desert plants. Relatives of the camel sit out winter snows. And parrots live by the sea. Gripped by winter for nearly half the year, Patagonia is a tough place to survive. Spring and summer are all too brief, and wildlife must rush to take advantage of a short opportunity to hunt and breed. On the northeast coast, the ocean collides with a remote peninsula. It's the ideal place for sea lions to rear their pups. It's the end of summer. For the last 2 months, the pups have enjoyed the safety of the beaches. But now they're getting curious and venturing into the water. They need to perfect their swimming skills before winter returns, and they have to take their first journey out to the open ocean. Surfing the shallows, they flex their flippers and gear up for a life at sea. But this nursery isn't a safe place. Orcas, or killer whales, are the ocean's apex predators and one of the most intelligent animals in the water. This Patagonian shore is the only place in the world where killer whales have learned to beach themselves as a hunting technique. It's a very risky maneuver. If they get stranded on land, their bodies would quickly collapse under their own weight. The killer whales patrolling Patagonia's beaches have learned how to wriggle back to deeper water. The hunter's window of opportunity is short-lived. In just 2 weeks, the sea lions will leave the beaches and head south to the rich feeding grounds of the South Atlantic. The southernmost tip of South America breaks up into a maze of fjords and islands. This archipelago at the end of the world is called Tierra del Fuego. Its most southerly headland, Cape Horn, is a treeless island of rock that marks the place where the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans meet. Antarctica is just 1,000 kilometers away. The seas around Cape Horn are some of the most notorious in the world, pounded by gale-force winds and dominated by waves up to 30 meters high. In the 16th century, explorers came here in search of a trade route to the Spice Islands and the riches of the East Indies. But for many, both boats and dreams were dashed against the rocks. Over 800 ships have been wrecked trying to round Cape Horn, and for centuries, it was known as the sailor's graveyard. Cold water from Antarctica pushes north along South America's west coast, from the southern tip of Chile right up to the equator. This vast, cold tongue of water is known as the Humboldt Current. Bringing nutrients up from the deep, it powers the most productive marine ecosystem in the world. While they may have claimed the lives of hundreds of sailors, the cold seas around the tip of Patagonia are bursting with life. Sardines form shoals that can be 20 meters across and made up of hundreds of thousands of individuals. A fifth of the world's entire fish catch comes from these waters. And so much fish attracts specialist fish hunters. A sea lion is one of the most skillful predators in the ocean. His rich diet helps him build up a layer of blubber, several centimeters thick, keeping him warm in almost freezing water. Tierra del Fuego is surrounded by icy waters, but its name means land of fire. This archipelago was named by Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan, who led the first European expedition here in 1520. From his ship, Magellan saw fires on the beaches that belonged to the native Yaghan and Shelknam people. Reports from this voyage tell of encounters with people 12 feet tall that roared like bulls. Magellan called these fearsome people Patagon, after the giant in a popular Spanish novel of the time. It was an outrageous exaggeration, but the mythology stuck, and Patagonia, the land of giants, was born. Today, this indigenous way of life is no more than a memory, but evidence of it remains. Mounds along the seashores are formed from piles of shells, known as concheros, all that is left of lost settlements. Women would coat themselves in seal fat and dive for shellfish in the cold waters. Men built canoes and huts from native lenga beech trees. The vanished people left their mark here. But there is something new that is changing the landscape dramatically. The forests of southern beech trees on these islands are some of the hardiest trees in the world. They tolerate gale-force winds, thrive in thin soil, and survive temperatures as low as -30 degrees. But they're succumbing to a new enemy: beavers. This male works hard to stockpile food for his family before the winter takes hold. In a few short weeks, his pond will freeze over, but he'll still be able to access his underwater larder. His thick, oily coat keeps him warm in the icy water. Like all rodents, this beaver has an insatiable desire to chew. His chisel-like teeth never stop growing, so he needs to gnaw wood to wear them down. This male is descended from just 50 Canadian beavers that were released in Tierra del Fuego in the 1940s to start a fur trade. The beavers thrived, but beaver fur hats went out of fashion, and the fur trade nosedived. Today, he's one of over 100,000 beavers here, and their dams have flooded thousands of hectares of Tierra del Fuego. These southern beech forests can't regenerate from the stump, so beaver damage kills them outright. Beaver dams turn pristine streams into stagnant ponds. Native animals such as these austral parakeets are suffering as a direct result. These little birds live further south than any other parrot in the world. As beavers cut down more and more trees, the parakeets' food supply and potential homes are running out. There's another bird here that seems to be thriving in the wake of the beaver's destruction, but only in the short term: the Magellanic woodpecker. A red-headed male forages with his family. Decaying logs felled by beavers are prime habitat for grubs. And the woodpeckers have the perfect tools to dislodge them. The beak is hard, and like the beaver's teeth, never stops growing. It's worn down by the bird's incessant hammering. Huge feet have toes that face both forwards and backwards, helping them keep a firm grip. And specially stiffened tail feathers brace against a tree like a tripod. But the woodpecker's secret weapon is its tongue, covered in sticky saliva and barbed at the end. It's the ideal weapon for skewering juicy prey. The woodpecker's tongue is also a built-in shock absorber. The tongue is almost as long as the bird's body, and it wraps around the woodpecker's skull, helping protect its brain from the impact of drilling for grubs. But the woodpecker's boom time won't last. Beaver-damaged trees rot away to nothing, and the forests are shrinking. Eventually, there won't be enough trees to support woodpeckers at all. Tierra del Fuego's snow-capped hills are the tail end of the longest mountain range on Earth. The Andes. They stretch north, 7,000 kilometers to Venezuela, on the Caribbean coast. They're so big, they determine the weather of the entire South American continent. At the onset of winter, moisture-laden air blowing in from the Pacific Ocean is forced up the steep slopes. already chilled by the Humboldt current coming up from the Antarctic. Water vapor in the rising air condenses and falls as snow, which gradually compacts into ice. 20,000 years ago, the whole of southern Chile was covered by ice. Today, just 4% of this ice sheet remains in 2 ice fields. The larger of the two, the southern Patagonian ice field, still extends nearly 17,000 square kilometers. It's the second largest expanse of ice in the world outside the poles. As winter approaches, more and more storms bring new snowfall to feed the ice field. Days shorten to just 7 hours of light. In the shadow of the freezing peaks, flamingos fuel up while they can. Their tongues pump up and down 6 times per second, pushing water through their beaks, allowing them to filter out algae and invertebrates. Soon the lake will freeze over, and the flamingos will be forced to move north, towards the equator. Not all animals can escape the brutal grip of winter. They have no choice but to sit out the snows. This guanaco's double coat of fur helps it cope with the cold. A fine down layer close to the skin insulates against the biting wind, and coarse outer hairs keep wet snow away from its body. Guanacos stick together in herds, keeping a wary eye out for danger. The puma is a constant threat. A grey fox is wily enough to follow the herds and ekes a meager living, picking up scraps from any puma kill. But climate is the biggest killer here. Not all animals will survive the 5 long months of winter. Guanacos recycle each mouthful of food, extracting every last nutrient available. A puma is desperately hungry, but the guanacos are on high alert. And without the element of surprise, the puma has little chance of making a kill. A hare is hardly more than a mouthful, but in these lean times, it could be the difference between life and death. There'll be few scraps left over for scavengers this time. Winter loosens its grip, but never lets go of Patagonia's mountains completely. Some snow melts, but the temperatures never rise enough to make much impact on the reservoir of ice. "48 glaciers slowly flow down the mountains from the southern Patagonian ice field. The Perito Moreno Glacier stretches for nearly 30 kilometers, filling a valley with ice up to 700 meters deep. Its front end is 5 kilometers wide. and towers over 70 meters above Lake Argentine. As it reaches the water, the ice destabilizes and breaks apart, a process known as calving. It's not melting, but collapsing under its own weight, as its rock foundation gives way to water. Perito Moreno is advancing and crawls forward by as much as a meter every day. At last, the days begin to lengthen and the snow line creeps uphill. The worst is over, and for those that have survived through to spring, this is a new season of opportunity. Grey foxes squabble over a guanaco carcass, uncovered by the melting snow. But they need to be quick. Andean condors outdo foxes in size and numbers, and soon muscle in on the feast. But even at this time of year, the condors wage a constant battle with the elements. They're very picky about where they roost, choosing an east-facing cliff to make the most of the weak spring sunshine. To help them fly, they rely on thermals, rising up the rock wall. With a wingspan of 3 meters, they can soar for hours, barely flapping their wings. Young birds try and find their place in the hierarchy of the roost. But there is a strict pecking order, and larger white-collared adults get the best perches. Intruders are not tolerated. Condors take 7 years to reach maturity and can live for over 50 years. So it's a long, hard climb to the top of the ranks. The Andes trap moisture, locking most of Patagonia's fresh water supply into its glaciers. Little rain makes it past the mountains. East of the range, the glacial lakes give way to the desert of Patagonia's steppe. Guanacos here have had a less severe winter than those in the highlands. But they face challenges of their own. With no rainfall and few rivers, guanacos must get all the moisture they need from eating the few tough plants that manage to grow in the arid conditions. Guanacos are the only large native herbivores able to survive here. But they do have competition. Introduced 150 years ago, sheep thrive in Patagonia. But only with man's help. By shepherding their flocks long distances between pastures and far-flung water points, gauchos can raise thousands of sheep for wool and meat. It's arduous work. These gauchos rely on their horses to reach their flocks. A river running through their land is a valuable asset, but as well as being a vital water supply, it can be a damaging force. Snowmelt in the mountains at this time of year can swell water levels dramatically in a matter of hours. Only a few days ago, the gauchos lost one of their dogs when it drowned in a flash flood. But they have no choice. but to press on and get to the herds. It's lambing time, the most dangerous time for sheep. A glut of young lambs often draws predators down from the mountains. They're much easier to hunt than wild guanacos. The gauchos cannot afford to lose their livelihoods to the jaws of a mountain lion. Pumas are pests here, and the gauchos need to be vigilant. Breeding working animals strong enough to cope with this ranching lifestyle is tough and dangerous. These young horses were born on the farm, but have never been handled. They've lived almost wild for the last 3 years, roaming the plains as a herd. But now it's time for them to be caught and tamed. Don Zoiler has been working with horses since he was a boy. In his younger days, he'd have broken in a horse using brute force. But today, he and his stepson Gerardo practice a more compassionate method. They believe the secret behind taming a horse is to speak its language and earn its trust. But it's not easy. Little by little, they introduce a young colt to a bit and a saddle. For a horse that's known nothing but the freedom of the fields, it's a shock to the system.
¡Ay! ¡Cálmate! ¡Cálmate! ¡No se abran las patas! No, no sea tan bruta a romper las cuerdas. ¡Ay! ¡Se va! ¡Se va!
This horse is so feisty, he's been named Chispa, meaning spark. It will take a good deal more persuasion to convince Chispa to toe the line. The steppe makes up 90% of Patagonia. The steep drop from the mountains to the plains generates an almost constant wind. Air currents race down the Andean slopes. Gale-force winds make it impossible for anything larger than a shrub to take hold. Gusts can be 100 miles an hour. Many Patagonian insects have lost the ability to fly. Their hard wing cases have become fused. In evolutionary terms, it's a step backwards. Flight is usually considered progress. But take off here, and they'd be blown out to sea. But there's more than just the wind to worry about. A Patagonian skunk forages for a meal. It's not a fussy eater. Skunks will eat anything they can lay their paws on, from rodents and lizards to insects and even carrion. A grasshopper disguises itself as a pebble in the hope of going unnoticed. A beetle can run, and it can try to hide. But the skunk's claws are built to dig, and the soft, sandy soil offers little protection. Within a few short weeks, the freezing winter is a distant memory. Every animal on the Patagonian steppe is in a hurry to make the most of spring. A male armadillo is on a mission to find a mate. His thick skin shields him from the thorny undergrowth. There's a female nearby, but she's more interested in finding food. The bony plate on her head helps her bulldoze through earth as she digs for prey. The male is hot on her heels. His eyesight is poor, but he sniffs her out. But mating isn't easy when you wear a suit of armor. Spring is turning into summer. So far south, average summer temperatures are no more than 15 degrees, but daylight lasts for 18 hours. Patagonia's shores draw in animals from far and wide. 800 kilometers east of the Andes, and beyond Patagonia's vast plains, lies Peninsula Valdez. It juts out into the Atlantic Ocean to form two sheltered bays, providing a welcome resting place for ocean wanderers. These Magellanic penguins have been at sea for 6 months. But they must come to the shore to breed. Penguins mate for life, and couples return to the same nest year after year. There are hundreds of thousands of penguin nests in several colonies along this coast. In these large rookeries, some penguins have to walk up to 2 kilometers inland to reach their burrow. Tough going for an animal adapted to life in the ocean. Penguin bodies are built for the sea. Tightly packed feathers are coated in water-resistant oil, secreted by a gland above the tail. And with flipper-like wings, they fly through the water. Life on land is much harder work. Even in Patagonia's cool spring days, a penguin can overheat. They can't sweat, but bare patches around the eyes dissipate heat, and they even pant to keep cool. Colonies disperse when they're at sea, and these penguin pairs haven't seen each other for 6 months. They're desperate to find their partners. But finding your mate among the multitude can be tricky. Bill fencing is a way of greeting old acquaintances. But not all penguins are pleased to see each other. Squabbles over nest sites are common. Loud brays carry right across the colony, and each penguin recognizes the distinctive call of its partner. These long-distance relationships seem to work. Couples reunite and settle down for a summer of cohabitation. Further down the coast, more marine animals are arriving. This time each year, more than 20,000 southern elephant seals descend on the beaches of Peninsula Valdez. It's the only elephant seal colony on the South American mainland. The first to arrive are the huge 5-meter bulls, who come early to claim the best beachfront spots. When the females arrive, in time to give birth after an 11-month pregnancy, they settle in harems around each male. Elephant seals spend most of their lives at sea, but must come ashore to breed. As a newborn seal takes its first breaths, kelp gulls move in. It's not the pup they're after. It's the placenta. Packed with protein, it's rich pickings. Seal milk is so nutritious, pups grow incredibly fast. And they need to. Pups suckle for just 3 weeks before the females leave them to fend for themselves. In this short time, they triple their weight, while mothers lose nearly half of theirs. This tiny whelp will weigh over 130 kilos by the time he's weaned. One infant has been abandoned and tries desperately to latch on to a foster mother. But the female cannot afford to nurse two. Her own pup will need every drop of milk she can provide if it's to stand any chance of survival. Animals all along the coastline are focused on breeding and giving their offspring the best possible start in life. Just offshore are some of the largest animals in the ocean. Southern right whales can grow up to 18 meters long and weigh as much as 80 tons. About 1,500 of these ocean giants spend the summer around Peninsula Valdez. Many have come to give birth. Away from the fierce seas, these protected bays and their relatively warm waters are the ideal nursery for young whales. Newborns weigh over 1,000 kilograms. Calves drink 200 liters of milk and put on 90 kilos every day. And they'll suckle for a year before they're weaned. Even these titans would be at risk in the open ocean. Great white sharks patrol offshore, where they would easily make a meal of a baby whale. Great whites need deep water to launch an attack and rarely venture into sheltered bays. So whale mothers know to hug the coastline to keep their young out of danger. But closer to land, there's another threat. Kelp gulls have learned that the lolling whales are the source of a good meal. Whale skin is surprisingly soft, and the gulls' beaks are rapier sharp. Dwarfed by the huge whales, the gulls pick at their blubber. Despite the size difference, the whales are clearly uncomfortable. As well as causing painful lesions, harassment from the gulls means whales dive more frequently, which can make life very hard for their calves. Youngsters can't hold their breath for as long as adults and need to lean on their mothers while they rest at the surface. In just a few weeks' time, the calves will need to be strong enough to leave these bays and migrate south with their mothers to their feeding grounds in Antarctica. 150 kilometers north of Peninsula Valdez is a more surprising breeding colony. Parrots are usually thought of as a tropical jungle bird, but these Patagonian Condors have moved to the seaside. This pair are renovating their cliffside burrow in preparation for laying this year's eggs. Most parrots use their beaks as nutcrackers, but these put them to work as pickaxes. Their nest holes can reach up to 4 meters into the cliff. A pair of Chimango caracaras scavenge below. A dried-out wing is not much of a meal, but they know that in a few weeks' time, there'll be a glut of parrot fledglings to feast on. Like penguins, these parrots mate for life. Nuzzling is more than a public display of affection. It helps keep each other clean and free from parasites. This pair are part of an extended family group that all live close by on this patch of cliff. Burrowing in the soft sandstone is a neat solution to life on the treeless, windy plains. It's the perfect place to nest. So perfect, in fact, that this couple are one of 35,000 breeding pairs that have taken up residence in a stretch of cliff 12 kilometers long. It's the largest colony of parrots anywhere in the world. Parrots see the world very differently to humans. To us, they all look identical. But to each other, males and females look strikingly different. Parrots see a broader color spectrum, including ultraviolet, so it's easy for them to tell each other apart. Males have brighter greens and deeper reds, while females have brighter blues and a longer red stripe on their undersides. And like all parrots, they're talkative. Just like humans, they gossip, telling each other what's going on in the rest of the flock. Living on top of each other can cause tempers to fray. Not all neighbors get on. But a sunset flight is all it takes to cool off. Further south, in the elephant seal colonies, passions are also running high. The breeding season is brief, but it's a very busy time. They're so focused on rearing young and defending territories that both males and females spend weeks without food. Soon they'll strike out to sea, where they'll spend the next 11 months, traveling up to 30,000 kilometers as they forage for food in the deep ocean. But before they embark on this epic journey, they need to mate. Dominant males control a stretch of shore and have their pick of the females on their perch. But it doesn't pay to be too complacent. Younger males, or those that arrive too late to stake a claim, are always on the lookout for opportunities to mate on the sly. One such Casanova checks to see if the coast is clear. The interloper spots his chance and makes his move. But it's hard to be subtle when you weigh 3 tons. And the females are far from cooperative. But he's nothing if not persistent. And his efforts pay off at last. The commotion hasn't gone unnoticed. The alpha male finally realizes there's a trespasser in his territory. But the intruder has no intention of giving in now. He squares up to his rival. The 2 males tower 4 meters above the beach. They're evenly matched. Neither is willing to back down. Fights can last as long as half an hour. And the results can be horrifying. Thick blubber around their necks provides some protection, but huge canine teeth can inflict serious damage. Bloodied and battered, the challenger finally retreats. The beachmaster holds control of his harem. The elephant-seal clashes are violent, but the giants offshore have a more peaceful approach to courtship. While most of the female right whales have come here to give birth, others have come to mate. They only do this once every 3 or 4 years. So when they do, they attract quite a crowd. As many as 20 males engage in an elegant courtship dance with each female. Surprisingly, there's no animosity between the suitors. In fact, they even seem to cooperate in persuading the female to mate. The secret behind this collaboration lies in the size of their testicles. Right whales have the largest testes of any animal on Earth. A pair quite literally weigh a ton. And among these giants, size does matter. The bigger the testes, the more sperm they produce, and the more likely a male is to father a calf. Spring, summer, and autumn are all packed into just a few months. The Patagonian year has come full circle. Wildlife all over Patagonia has seized this short season of opportunity to gather and breed. Soon, winter will take hold here once more. Patagonia is one of South America's last great wildernesses. A windswept plain in the shadow of frozen mountains. A landscape carved by ice that has long loomed large in our imaginations. Monstrous humans may be fantasy, but nature's giants thrive here. Patagonia's coastline is the breeding ground for wildlife as diverse as whales and penguins. Its buffeted plains are home to creatures adapted to the harshest environments in South America. As each year passes, animals and people continue to cling to survival here, at the ends of the earth.